They sold the Barren Omega, until the Alpha King chose her before the entire pack. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Little did Elara know. This would be the night everything changed for her. The full moon hung high in the sky, casting its eerie glow over the ancient stone platform where the pack gathered for the night's ceremony. The air was thick with tension as the Alpha King, Riven, surveyed the crowd. His eyes scanned the sea of faces, his powerful presence making the very ground beneath him feel alive. All eyes were on him, but Elara wasn't thinking about the spectacle in front of her. She had been standing at the edge of the gathering for hours, her heart pounding as the ceremony unfolded. The pack had gathered, hoping for a chance to be chosen, to be claimed by one of the alphas. Elara had always known she would never be picked. She wasn't the type to be desired. Born barren with no scent to call her own, she was the perfect example of a rejected Omega, the one nobody wanted. Her family had sold her off, hoping that someone would take her, give her a home, or at the very least, a life where she wasn't an embarrassment. But no one wanted her. And as the ceremony continued, Elara knew the truth. She was just a piece of property, something to be traded, something to be discarded. The whispers of the pack filled the air around her. She's barren, they said. Worthless. They were right, of course. Elara had no scent to attract a mate, no value to offer the pack. She was nothing more than a shadow, a useless Omega. Her mind raced as she fought back the tears. She had dreamed of a life where she was seen, where she was valued. But those dreams had been shattered long ago. As the bidding started, the crowd's murmurs grew louder and Elara felt her stomach twist. She had been sold. She was going to be claimed by someone, anyone, just so that she could have a place to belong. But in that moment, just as she thought she would be sold off to the highest bidder, something changed. The crowd fell silent, and the Alpha King, Riven, stepped forward. His eyes locked onto Elara's, and in that instant everything stopped. She froze, unable to look away. The entire pack watched as Riven made his way toward her. With each step, the tension in the air grew, and Elara's heart pounded in her chest. What was happening? Why was he coming toward her? The Alpha King, the most powerful man in the pack, stopped in front of Elara. His gaze was intense, studying her as if she were the most important person in the world. He didn't speak at first, but the energy around him was palpable. Elara felt a surge of warmth fill her chest, a strange sensation she couldn't quite explain. The moment felt like a dream, like she was floating in the air, suspended between reality and something else entirely. Then, with a voice that echoed through the silence, Riven spoke. "I choose her," he said, his words firm and unwavering. The pack gasped, shock spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Elara couldn't believe what she was hearing. The Alpha King, the most powerful of them all, had chosen her, the Barren Omega. The moment was surreal, like a spell had been cast over her. She felt the weight of the pack's eyes on her, but it didn't matter. Riven had chosen her. And in that instant, Elara's life was about to change forever. The crowd was still in shock. Elara stood frozen in place, her heart pounding so loudly she thought everyone around her could hear it. She had heard his words clearly, but they didn't seem real. I choose her. The Alpha King, the most powerful man in the pack, had chosen her. The Barren Omega no one wanted. The pack was still, as if time had stopped for a moment. Elara could feel every pair of eyes burning into her, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from Riven. He was so close now, towering over her. His intense silver eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time in her life, Elara didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like an outcast. She felt seen, acknowledged, even if she didn't understand why. The Alpha King stepped forward and extended his hand to her. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like everything had changed in that one moment. Elara's hand shook as she reached out to take his. The instant their skin touched, something electric passed between them, a spark that made her gasp. A wave of warmth surged through her chest, and for the first time in a long while, She didn't feel the coldness of rejection. She felt wanted. "Come with me," Riven said, his voice low and commanding. Elara nodded, still too stunned to speak. The Alpha King, who had always been a figure of strength and power, was now offering her something she never thought she'd have. A place by his side star. The pack watched as they made their way toward the center of the gathering, Riven's hand still holding hers firmly. As they walked, whispers rippled through the crowd. "He chose her," someone murmured. "But she's barren. She has no value to the pack. She's nothing but a burden," another voice added. Elara's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she held her head high. For the first time she didn't care about the whispers. She was with Riven, and that was all that mattered. They reached the stone platform where Riven turned to face the crowd. His eyes swept over the pack, the same pack that had looked down on Elara for so long. With a fierce expression he raised his voice. "This Omega is mine," he declared, his words ringing out with authority. "From this moment forward, she will be treated with the respect she deserves. Any who challenge this will answer to me." Elara's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak about her like this. She had always been the one to be ignored, ridiculed, and discarded. But now Riven, the Alpha King, was speaking for her. And in that moment, she knew that her life would never be the same. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer worthless. She was someone's mate. And that someone was the Alpha King. The pack was silent for a moment, processing his words. Then slowly the tension broke, and a few murmurs of disbelief spread through the crowd. Elara couldn't help but feel a sense of pride rise within her. She was standing before them, not as the discarded Omega, but as Riven's chosen one. She was his Luna, his equal. She wasn't just a shadow anymore. She was a part of something bigger. Riven looked at her then, his gaze softening for the briefest moment. "You are mine now," he said, his voice much gentler than before. "And I will protect you, Elara. You will never be treated as less again." Elara couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was this really happening? Was she really standing here, next to the Alpha King, being declared his mate before the entire pack? She could feel the weight of his words sinking in, and a wave of emotion surged within her. She had never imagined this kind of life. And now that it was happening, she didn't know how to react. Riven's hand gently cupped her cheek, pulling her out of her thoughts. His touch was warm, and for the first time in her life Elara felt safe. "Come," he said, leading her away from the platform. As they walked, the pack slowly began to disperse, whispers still lingering in the air, but no longer filled with ridicule. There was something new now, respect. Riven had chosen her, and no one dared challenge his decision. They reached the large tent set up for the Alpha King's private quarters. Inside, the atmosphere was calm, almost peaceful compared to the chaos outside. Riven motioned for Elara to sit, and she obeyed, her heart still racing. "You are safe here," Riven said, his voice low but reassuring. "No one will harm you, not while I'm here." Elara nodded, her eyes searching his. "Why did you choose me?" she asked softly. Riven's gaze softened as he sat down next to her. "Because I saw something in you. Something that no one else saw. You're stronger than you realize, Elara. And I will make sure you never forget that." His words were sincere, and for the first time, Elara felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer invisible. She was someone's chosen, and that meant everything. Elara sat in the quiet of Riven's private quarters, her mind still reeling from the events of the night. It was hard to believe that just hours ago she had been nothing more than a rejected Omega, sold off to the highest bidder. And now she sat beside the Alpha King himself, her life transformed in a single moment. The room was warm, the flickering firelight casting soft shadows on the walls, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Elara felt a sense of peace wash over her. Riven sat across from her, his silver eyes watching her intently, as if he were waiting for something. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Elara nodded, though she couldn't quite find the words to explain what she was feeling. Everything was happening so quickly, and the weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought this would happen. I never thought I'd be chosen." Especially not by someone like you. Riven's lips curled into a small smile, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. I chose you because you are not like the others. You are strong in ways they will never understand. I see that now. Elara's heart fluttered in her chest at his words, but doubt still lingered in her mind. But I'm Barren, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I have no scent. I can't even give you what you need. How can you truly want me? Riven reached out, his hand gently brushing her cheek. You are more than what others see. The bond we share goes beyond what others can understand. It's not about what you can give me. It's about what we can build together. His touch was warm, and Elara felt the flutter of something deep inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. For the first time she believed he might truly care for her, not out of obligation, but because he saw her for who she truly was. You'll see, Riven said softly. In time you'll see how strong you really are. Elara looked up into his eyes, her heart racing. What do you want from me, Riven? What is it you expect from me now that I'm yours? The question hung in the air between them, and for a moment Riven was silent. He seemed to be considering his words carefully before speaking again. I don't expect anything from you, Elara. Not yet. You have already given me your trust, and that is more than enough for now. What I want is for you to be by my side, to stand with me as my equal and to help me lead our pack. Together we can be unstoppable. Elara felt a weight lift off her shoulders at his words, as if the burden she had carried all these years was slowly being lifted. She had always felt weak, insignificant, like she was just taking up space in a world that didn't care for her. But here with Riven she didn't feel that way. She felt like she mattered. She felt like she was finally home. I will stand with you, she said, her voice steady now. I don't know what the future holds, but I'll be by your side. Riven's smile was small but genuine, and for the first time, Elara saw a softness in him that she hadn't noticed before. He wasn't just the ruthless alpha king everyone feared. He was a man who cared deeply for those he chose to protect. Then we will face it together, he said, his voice firm with resolve. As the night wore on, Elara found herself growing more comfortable in Riven's presence. They spoke of their future, of the challenges they would face together, and of the pack they would lead. Elara realized that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. With Riven by her side, she felt like she could face anything. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Elara settled into her new role. The pack, though initially shocked by Riven's decision, began to show her the respect she had always craved. The whispers of doubt and disdain that had followed her for so long slowly faded away, replaced by a new sense of belonging. She had been chosen not as a burden, but as a true mate, someone with a purpose and a place in the pack. But even as Elara began to feel more at home, there were challenges ahead. Not everyone in the pack was thrilled with Riven's decision, and whispers of rebellion began to stir in the shadows. Elara could feel the tension growing, but she refused to let it shake her resolve. She would stand by Riven no matter what because she knew that together they were stronger than anyone could imagine. One evening as she walked through the pack's training grounds, Elara overheard a conversation between two of the higher-ranking wolves. The Alpha King has gone soft, one of them said, his voice low and bitter. He's chosen a Barren Omega as his mate. How could he be so weak? Elara felt a flash of anger rise within her, but she kept her expression neutral as she walked past them. She had heard this kind of talk before, but now it didn't affect her the way it once had. She wasn't the weak Omega they thought she was. She was Riven's mate, and she would prove her worth to them, no matter what it took. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change for Elara. She was no longer the weak Omega that had been sold off to the highest bidder, but Riven's chosen mate, the Alpha King's equal. The pack began to see her differently, though there were still whispers in the shadows. Some were still not pleased with Riven's choice, and their discontent was palpable. Elara could feel the tension in the air, but she refused to let it shake her. She knew she had a place in this pack now, and she would defend it with everything she had. It wasn't long before Riven began preparing her for the role she would play by his side. He took her aside one evening, his silver eyes soft as he spoke. Elara, the time will come when we must show the pack that we are not to be underestimated. You will be by my side when we face the challenges ahead. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, one that Elara had come to recognize as his determination. I know you may feel uncertain at times, but remember this: together we can lead this pack. I chose you for your strength, even if you don't fully see it in yourself yet. Elara's heart swelled at his words, but doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. She had never imagined herself as a leader, let alone as someone who could stand beside Riven as his mate. But she was learning, and with each passing day she grew stronger. She would not let her past define her any longer. Over the next few weeks, Riven and Elara worked together to strengthen the pack. They held council meetings, spoke to the higher-ranking wolves, and made decisions that would affect the future of their territory. Riven was a strong leader, but he was wise enough to know that Elara's insights, her perspective, were just as valuable. Slowly but surely, the pack began to recognize her worth. One evening, as they walked through the training grounds together, a voice called out from the shadows. The Alpha King has made a mistake. A voice hissed, dripping with disdain. That Omega is nothing. She'll never be the mate of an Alpha King. Elara froze at the sound of the words, the familiar sting of rejection rising in her chest. But she stood tall, her eyes narrowing as she turned toward the source of the voice. It was one of the higher-ranking wolves, a male named Thorin, who had always looked down on her. Riven, standing beside her, stepped forward, his gaze cold and commanding. Thorin, he said, his voice low but filled with authority. You will show respect to my mate, or you will answer to me. The challenge was clear, and for a moment, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. But Thorin, seeing the unwavering strength in Riven's eyes, bowed his head. I meant no disrespect, my king, he muttered, his tone begrudging. Riven didn't look back as he turned to Elara, offering her a small, reassuring smile. You are stronger than they realize, he said softly. Elara's chest swelled with pride at his words, but her mind raced. Thorin wasn't the only one who doubted her. She could feel the eyes of the pack on her every day, their judgment, their expectations. But as the days passed, she began to embrace the role she had been given, the role of Riven's mate, the Luna of their pack. She was no longer the weak Omega who had been cast aside. She was strong and she had a place here. One afternoon, as Elara sat with Riven, discussing the future of their pack, he looked at her with a gaze that held a mix of admiration and something deeper. Elara, he said softly, his voice almost hesitant. I want you to know that it's not just about the pack. It's about you and me. I chose you because I see something in you that no one else does. You are my equal, and I will never treat you as anything less. Elara's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time, she felt truly at peace with her new life. She had been chosen, not just as a mate, but as someone Riven truly cared for. As they continued to lead the pack together, the whispers of doubt slowly faded away, replaced by a sense of respect and admiration from those around them. The journey ahead was still uncertain, and there would be challenges, but Elara no longer feared them. She was no longer just an Omega, no longer invisible. She was Riven's mate, his partner, and together, they would face whatever came their way. As the days passed, Elara began to feel more and more at home beside Riven, though she knew their journey was far from over. The pack, though slowly warming to the idea of her as their Luna, still held on to their doubts. Some of the higher-ranking wolves, especially those who had opposed Riven's decision from the beginning, continued to test her, to challenge her. But with each passing challenge, Elara grew stronger. Riven's support was unwavering, and she knew that together they could overcome anything. It was late one evening when Riven called Elara to the council chamber. The firelight flickered against the stone walls, casting shadows that danced across the floor. Riven sat at the head of the large wooden table. His usual commanding presence softened in the quiet of the room. Elara, he said, his voice gentle yet firm. There is something we must address. The pack has begun to show signs of resistance. There are those who still believe you are unworthy of being my mate. Elara stood at the entrance, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She had known there were whispers, but hearing it so plainly made her stomach churn. What should we do? She asked, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. We will show them who we are, Riven replied, standing and walking toward her. I chose you because I see your strength, and I will not let them undermine you. Together, we will prove to them that you belong here, by my side, as my Luna. Elara nodded, her resolve hardening. She had come so far from the broken Omega who had been sold off to the highest bidder. She had fought for her place here, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away. The following days were filled with intense preparation. Riven and Elara spent long hours discussing strategy, leadership, and how to unite the pack. The Alpha King was still the most powerful figure in the pack, but Elara had proven herself capable of making decisions, of standing strong in the face of adversity. One evening as they walked through the pack's training grounds, Elara noticed the tension that still lingered in the air. There were eyes on her wherever she went, some filled with respect, others filled with contempt. It was clear that the pack was watching, waiting to see what she would do next. As they approached a group of wolves practicing their combat skills, one of them, a tall, muscular male named Gregor, stepped forward. His eyes were cold as he addressed Elara. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're weak, just like all the others who failed to be chosen." Elara felt her heart race, but she refused to back down. She had faced rejection her entire life, and she wasn't about to let it defeat her now. "You don't know me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I've been through more than you can imagine, and I'm still standing." Gregor scoffed, stepping closer to her. "You think you can lead this pack? You're nothing more than an Omega who's been chosen out of pity." Elara's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but before she could respond, Riven stepped forward, his presence immediately silencing the room. "That is enough," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Gregor, you will show my mate the respect she deserves, or you will answer to me." The pack watched in stunned silence as Riven's cold, unwavering gaze locked onto Gregor. The larger wolf took a step back, his expression faltering under the Alpha King's scrutiny. "Yes, Alpha," Gregor muttered, bowing his head in defeat. Elara watched the exchange, her heart pounding. Riven was fierce when it came to protecting her, and she was beginning to realize just how powerful they were together. No one would stand in their way. As they continued their walk, Riven's hand found hers, and he squeezed it gently. "You handled that well," he said, his voice softening. Elara smiled up at him, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "I learned from the best," she replied, her voice full of conviction. Riven's eyes softened as he looked down at her. "I knew you were strong," he said quietly, "but you've proven that you're more than capable. You belong here, Elara. You belong by my side." Elara felt a warmth spread through her at his words, but she knew their journey was just beginning. The pack still had many challenges ahead, and she would face them head-on, standing tall beside Riven. She was no longer the weak Omega, and she would never let anyone see her that way again. Together they would lead their pack to greatness, and Elara would prove that she was worthy of being Riven's mate, worthy of being their Luna. As time passed, Elara continued to grow into her role as Luna by Riven's side. The challenges she faced were not over, but each day brought new opportunities to prove her strength, not just to the pack but to herself. The whispers of doubt that had followed her in the beginning were beginning to fade, replaced by the respect she had worked so hard to earn. But there were still those who tested her, those who felt threatened by her position, and it was in moments like these that Elara realized just how much the pack needed leadership. One evening, as she and Riven walked through the territory together, they heard a disturbance from one of the outer guard posts. Riven's face hardened as he immediately turned toward the sound, his hand finding Elara's to pull her with him. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low and commanding. Elara didn't argue. She had seen the power in Riven before, and she knew that when it came to protecting the pack, he would not hesitate. They reached the scene where two wolves clearly agitated were confronting each other. One of them, a younger wolf named Yarok, was shouting, his eyes full of fury. "I won't take orders from her," he yelled. "She's nothing but a weak Omega who doesn't belong here." Elara's heart clenched at the words, but she remained silent, standing next to Riven, who was now radiating authority. Yarok, not noticing them at first, continued his rant, his voice full of venom. "The pack is falling apart and she's the reason. The Alpha King has gone soft and we're all going to pay for it." Riven stepped forward, his presence instantly silencing the younger wolf. His eyes were cold, and Elara could feel the tension in the air. The threat of violence hanging by a thread. "Yarok," Riven said, his voice calm but dangerous, "you will show respect for my mate or you will leave this pack." Jarek's face twisted in anger, but he didn't move. "I won't follow her. She's not fit to lead us." Elara, sensing Riven's patience beginning to wear thin, stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "I am not here to take what you think belongs to you. I'm here to protect this pack, just as much as Riven is. I am his equal, and I will prove it to you and anyone else who doubts me." The words rang out firm and unwavering. She felt the power behind them, even as they left her lips, and for the first time Elara knew she wasn't speaking just to prove herself to Yarok, but to everyone who had ever doubted her. The silence that followed her declaration was thick. Jarek's eyes narrowed, but the challenge in his expression slowly faded. "We'll see," he muttered under his breath, turning away and walking off into the night. Riven's eyes softened as he looked at her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You handled that well," he said, his voice filled with pride. Elara looked up at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I'm not afraid of him or anyone else who thinks they can intimidate me," she said, her voice steady and strong. As they turned to walk back toward the main camp, Elara's thoughts drifted to the future. She had never imagined herself as someone who could lead, who could stand beside Riven and make decisions for the pack. But now she was beginning to understand her own strength. She wasn't just the weak Omega who had been sold off for a price. She was Riven's mate, his partner, and together, they would bring their pack to a new future, one where no one would ever doubt her again. In the coming days the pack faced new challenges, troubles from rival packs, issues with territory, and the ever-present struggle for respect. But Elara found that with Riven by her side, the fear that once plagued her began to fade. She was no longer an outsider. She was a leader, someone whose voice mattered. The more she worked with Riven, the more she saw the respect in the eyes of those around her, and with each passing day, her confidence grew. She was more than just a mate. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the weeks went by, Elara and Riven's bond grew even stronger. They fought side by side, made decisions together, and supported each other through every trial the pack faced. Elara had come a long way from the broken Omega who had been cast aside. Now she stood tall, not just as Riven's mate, but as a leader in her own right, ready to face whatever challenges the future would bring. And as she looked at Riven standing by her side, Elara knew one thing for certain: together, they would shape the future of their pack, and nothing would stand in their way. As the days passed, Elara continued to settle into her role as Luna, growing more confident with each passing moment. Her relationship with Riven had deepened, their bond growing stronger as they faced challenges together. The pack had started to see her differently, and though there were still murmurs of doubt, Elara no longer let them affect her. She had proven herself time and time again, not only to Riven but to the entire pack. One afternoon as Elara walked through the camp, she noticed a group of wolves gathering near the training grounds. There was an unease in the air, a tension that made her pause. Riven had been gone for several days on a journey to secure an alliance with a neighboring pack, and in his absence, some of the wolves had become restless. Elara approached the group, her eyes scanning the faces of the wolves as they whispered among themselves. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying the authority of someone who had earned her place. One of the wolves, a female named Maris, looked up at her, her eyes filled with concern. "There's talk of a challenge, Luna," Maris said quietly. "A challenge to your position." Elara's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her composure. "A challenge," she repeated, her voice steady. "Who dares challenge me?" The pack's hierarchy was sacred, and the idea that someone would challenge her as Luna was almost unheard of. Maris hesitated before answering, clearly uncomfortable. "It's Thorin, Luna. He's been gathering support, and some of the other wolves are backing him." Elara's mind raced. Thorin, the same wolf who had once disrespected her so openly, was now threatening to challenge her. It was clear he wasn't going to back down. He had always been proud and determined, but this was something else. Elara could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had worked so hard to earn the pack's respect, and now it seemed that someone was trying to tear it all away. But she would not let that happen. If Thorin wants a challenge, he will have it, Elara said, her voice filled with quiet determination. But I will not be driven out of this pack. I belong here just as much as any of them. Maris nodded, a look of relief crossing her face. We'll stand by you, Luna, she said softly. Elara gave her a grateful smile, but inside, a storm of emotions was brewing. The thought of having to fight for her place to prove herself once again was overwhelming. But she was no stranger to adversity. She had faced rejection, ridicule, and scorn her entire life. This was just another battle, and she would win it. When Riven returned the next day, he could immediately sense the tension in the air. Elara stood tall as he approached, her expression resolute. What's going on, Elara? Riven asked, his tone sharp with concern. Elara explained everything. The challenge from Thorin, the support he had gained, and the unrest spreading through the pack. Riven's eyes darkened as he listened, but when Elara finished, he placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. You will not face this alone, he said softly. We will handle this together. Elara's heart swelled with gratitude. She knew she could count on him, but part of her felt the need to prove that she could handle this herself. I can do this, Riven, she said, her voice firm. I've earned my place here, and I won't let anyone take it from me. Riven's eyes softened and he nodded. I know you will. And I'll be right by your side, every step of the way. The day of the challenge arrived, and the pack gathered in the central clearing, a circle of wolves standing, silently waiting for the confrontation to begin. Elara stood at the center, her heart pounding in her chest, but she refused to show any fear. Thorin stepped forward, his broad shoulders squared, his gaze fixed on her with defiance. I challenge you, Elara, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. You are not fit to lead this pack. You are nothing but a weak Omega, and I will prove it. The pack murmured, some of them looking uneasy, others watching with anticipation. Elara could feel the weight of their eyes on her, but she stood her ground. I accept your challenge, Thorin, she said, her voice strong. But know this, I will not back down. I will fight for my place here, just as I've fought for everything in my life. The tension in the air was thick as Thorin and Elara squared off, the challenge set. This was not just a fight for leadership, but a fight for respect, for recognition, and for the future of the pack. Elara was ready. She had come so far, and she would not let anyone take that from her. With a deep breath, she steeled herself for the battle ahead. She would prove to Thorin, to the entire pack, that she was more than just a weak Omega. She was their Luna, and she would fight to the end to keep that title. The air was thick with tension as the challenge between Elara and Thorin began. The pack had gathered in a large circle, watching silently as Elara stood tall, facing her opponent. Thorin was a formidable wolf, tall and muscular, his eyes filled with the same disdain they had held for her from the start. But Elara refused to back down. She had faced rejection her whole life, and this challenge was just another step in proving to herself and the pack that she was worthy of being their Luna. You're not fit to lead this pack, Elara, Thorin sneered, stepping closer to her, his voice low and taunting. You're nothing but a weak Omega. You think just because Riven chose you, you've earned your place? You're wrong. Elara met his gaze, her heart pounding, but her voice was steady. I am not weak, she said firmly. I've fought for everything I have, and I'll fight for my place here, for the pack, just as much as anyone else. Thorin lunged at her, his body moving with the speed and power of a seasoned warrior. Elara had no choice but to react, sidestepping just in time as Thorin's claws slashed through the air where she had been standing. The pack watched in silence, their eyes locked on the fight. Elara's heart raced, but she remained focused. She wasn't about to let Thorin's arrogance overwhelm her. With a deep breath, she let her instincts take over. As Thorin turned to face her again, Elara's body moved before her mind could even catch up, her training kicking in as she darted forward and aimed a precise strike at his side. The force of the blow sent Thorin stumbling back, a look of surprise flashing across his face. He hadn't expected her to be this skilled. For a moment Elara could feel the pack's eyes on her, a mixture of shock and respect in the air. She had just proven that she wasn't the weak Omega they had thought her to be. Thorin growled, his pride hurt, and charged at her again, but this time Elara was ready. She moved with speed and precision, dodging his attack and landing another well-placed strike. The force of her blow sent him tumbling to the ground, his body hitting the earth with a heavy thud. Elara stood over him, her chest rising and falling with the effort of the fight, but her gaze was unwavering. Thorin was down, but she knew the battle wasn't over. "Do you still doubt me?" she asked, her voice cold and steady as she looked down at him. Thorin struggled to push himself up, his eyes filled with fury. He was humiliated, but he refused to back down. "You're nothing," he spat, his breath ragged. "You can't lead this pack. You'll fail just like all the others." But Elara didn't flinch. She had been through too much to let his words affect her now. "I will not fail," she said, her voice firm and commanding. "And neither will this pack. We are strong together." With that, she turned to face the pack, her heart swelling with pride as she stood tall. The wolves who had been watching in silence now began to murmur, their expressions changing from skepticism to admiration. Elara had fought for her place, and she had won it. The challenge had been hard, but it had proved what Elara had always known deep down, that she was strong, capable, and worthy of being their Luna. Riven stepped forward, his presence commanding, and placed a hand on her shoulder. His eyes were filled with pride as he looked at her. "You've done well, Elara," he said softly. "You've shown the pack that you are not just my mate, but a true leader. I knew you had it in you." Elara smiled up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. For the first time in her life, she truly felt like she belonged. She wasn't just the Omega who had been sold off. She was Riven's mate, his partner, and now she was the Luna of the pack. The battle had been won, but the true challenge was just beginning. Elara knew that there would be more struggles ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But she was ready. She had proven herself to the pack, and now it was time to prove that she was capable of leading them into a new future. As she stood by Riven's side, she knew one thing for certain: together, they would build a pack that was strong, united, and unstoppable. And no one, not even Thorin, would ever question her again. The days that followed the challenge were filled with a sense of renewal and strength. Elara had proven herself to the pack, and now she stood proudly as Riven's mate and the Luna of their pack. The tension that had once loomed over her every step began to dissipate, replaced by respect from those who had once doubted her. The whispers of those who had questioned her were now gone, and even Thorin, who had been her fiercest opponent, no longer challenged her authority. It was as if the pack had finally seen her for who she truly was. Not just a Barren Omega, but a leader, someone capable of standing beside Riven and guiding their people to greatness. As Elara and Riven walked through the camp one evening, the sun setting behind them, Elara felt a deep sense of peace. The weight that had once rested on her shoulders seemed lighter now, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly at home. "Riven," Elara said softly, her voice full of emotion. "I never thought I would be here, standing by your side, leading the pack with you." Riven stopped and turned to her, his eyes soft with understanding. "You have earned every bit of it, Elara. I always knew you had the strength within you. You were never just an Omega. You were always destined for more." Elara smiled, her heart swelling with love for him. She had once feared that her past would define her forever, but now she knew that it was her choices that mattered. She had chosen to fight, to stand strong, and to never give up on herself. And now she was leading their pack side by side with the Alpha King. "Together," Elara said, her voice steady, "we will make this pack stronger than ever." Riven nodded, his hand finding hers and holding it tightly. "Together," he agreed. As they walked through the camp, Elara couldn't help but feel the eyes of the pack upon them. They were no longer filled with doubt or judgment, but with admiration and respect. Elara had earned her place here, not just as Riven's mate, but as a leader in her own right. Her journey had been long and hard, but it had brought her to this moment, this place of peace and strength. And as the pack looked to them, Elara knew that their future was bright. The challenges they had faced together had only made them stronger, and there would be more to come. But Elara was ready. She was no longer the broken Omega who had been cast aside. She was the Luna, the partner to Riven, and together they would lead their pack to a new era of unity and strength. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Elara was no longer afraid. She had found her place and she had found her strength. And with Riven by her side, there was nothing they couldn't face.